he has the right to also tell the attorney general not to pursue cases, and they will simply not pursue the two cases federally against him. He won't need to pardon himself.
Donald Trump has made the greatest political comeback of all time. It's certainly an arguable point. It's partly down to his strengths, how he strikes a chord with the public. But Republicans will also admit that Democrats made some mistakes that helped them out. This is what Greg Swenson, chair of the Republicans Overseas Group, told us earlier.
But I think the worst of all was, probably the weaponization of the justice system, but the censorship. This is the party that used to pride itself on freedom of speech. Mike Dukakis was the card-carrying member of the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. I mean, these are things that they've really turned their back on, and I think it was a huge mistake. The Trump hatred, just made them do things they probably would have never done a generation ago. And so hopefully they reflect on that and realize that being the party of hate is not going to work.
And more than one person has said the weaponization of the charges against Trump was a significant factor in this election. Let's talk to David Katz, a former assistant U.S. attorney, federal prosecutor, been on the program numerous times to guide us to the legal issues facing Donald Trump. David, good morning to you.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
The argument here is that by going after Donald Trump, by prosecuting him, by sometimes using the federal authorities, sometimes the state authorities, the Democrats have actually hurt themselves, because for every time they went after Trump in the courts, they converted another person who believes that the establishment was out to get him. Is that a fair charge, do you think?
I think it really is unfair. I think that, we all you saw it over there in the United Kingdom, the January 6th marauding of the Capitol, the attempted coup. We've never had anything like that in America. And even while it was going on, Trump, instead of tamping it down, he sent out an incendiary tweet, and they had that gallows there and were saying, hang Mike Pence, who was his vice president. So, I think that it was actually hard to resist appointing a special prosecutor. And I think that the head of the Department of Justice here, Merrick Garland, I think acted very judiciously, and actually a lot of people think he acted slowly, but that seems to all be in the rearview mirror. Likewise, the case in Mar-a-Lago, the Department of Justice filed it in a place where they had a 1 in 3 chance of getting a Trump ally, and they got her, and the case is on hold right now. As to the state cases, to show you how polarized it is over here in the United States, Fani Willis, who's the district attorney down there in Atlanta, Georgia, she was reelected in a landslide. Now, will those cases really go forward, the state cases down in Atlanta? There's a lot of appellate court work that has to be done before then. Maybe the appellate court will monkey with that case, but it may actually be back, and she'll be trying to prosecute the president of the United States. I think some of those state cases, didn't make much sense in retrospect, but the proponents of those cases, I was a federal prosecutor here, the state prosecutors there would say, the DAs, that they had the evidence, they presented it to a grand jury. The grand juries over here are just rubber stamps. But, I think the good news is that Trump will try to be conciliatory, and I think maybe the justice systems in those states will be conciliatory back, and we'll kind of start with a clean slate, which for a lot of reasons might be a real good idea at this point. He'll certainly dismiss the 2 federal cases. He has the power to do that. The federal cases will end very soon after his inauguration.
And can you prosecute the president even if you're a state? Is that technically constitutionally possible?
Well, we don't know. If you want to know the history, Aaron Burr, who was remade famous by the Hamilton musical, he was prosecuted for the duel in New York state courts, and then he was also prosecuted in the New Jersey courts. Now, that was a simpler age, so what he did as vice president is he just never set foot in those 2 states. But to answer your question, remember there's this presidential immunity that the U.S. Supreme Court just held a few months ago in a very controversial decision. But with that presidential immunity, I think that covers, the federal courts covers not just the federal courts, but also the states.
Really?
And so I think the answer would be that for official acts, no, he could not be prosecuted. And those cases may yet be thrown out on that basis when they're appealed through the state court systems all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
He's going to be sentenced in a couple of weeks' time, isn't it? Is that the Stormy Daniels one? Can he be sentenced as a president? I mean, he was never going to go to prison for that anyway, is he? So presumably, will that still just go ahead?
Well, I've said that for a long time, and it's been controversial because, you talked about the hate against Trump. He earned a lot of it. And hopefully in his new term, he'll be more like a Rockefeller Republican, which is what some people had hoped when he won in 2016. But then, of course, he went on continuing to tweet, continuing to insult people. Maybe he's learned something. Maybe he's gotten to be larger, and maybe he'll decide that, if he rules with some equanimity, maybe he won't generate so much hate,
But he's legally inviolate now, really. All of the troubles that were facing him, the presidency cleans them all off.
Well, the federal ones, remember, he does control the Department of Justice. We've done some things since Watergate to try to give independence, to not have the attorney general be under the thumb. But, this unitary executive theory that they have, he is part of the executive branch. And so the president can fire the attorney general. And so he has the right to also tell the attorney general not to pursue cases, and they will simply not pursue the two cases federally against him. He won't need to pardon himself. The state cases, as I say, I think they may get knocked down either by the judgment of the prosecutors rethinking them, or by the state appellate courts, or by the U.S. Supreme Court. But to answer your question, he cannot be jailed. As a practical matter, he'd either get bail pending appeal, or he would not be jailed during his 4-year term. This idea that he'd be at the Rikers Island prison as a prisoner and having a state dinner at Rikers Island prison for Macron, that's a parody.
Yeah, it's mad that we have to explain this, but this was the thing he wanted. He had lots of legal problems. We've spoken about them. Those legal problems, by what you're saying, have gone away. David, great to hear from you as ever. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to hear from you. And, it's not over till it's over, but it just seems one more state, anything breaks Trump's way, it looks like he is the president-elect.
Yeah, it is over, David. I've got to put it to you. He is the next president, but you're absolutely right. He's still on 266. He's not formally been declared. That is probably on its way. Great to speak to you. That's David Katz there. He is a former federal prosecutor.
Now, President Zelensky has tweeted, which is quite interesting, congratulations to Donald Trump on his impressive election victory. I recall a great meeting with President Trump in September when we discussed in detail the Ukraine-US strategic partnership, the victory plan, and ways to put an end to Russian aggression against Ukraine. I appreciate President Trump's commitment to the peace through strength approach in global affairs. This is exactly the principle that can practically bring just peace in Ukraine closer. I am hopeful that we will put it into action together. We look forward to an era of a strong United States of America under President Trump's decisive leadership. I'm trying to skim this, but I think that's pretty much the gist of it. We're interested in developing mutually beneficial political and economic cooperation that will benefit both of our nations. I'm looking forward to personally congratulating President Trump and discussing ways to strengthen our partnership.